Hi, hello, good morning, and welcome to Sunday Morning Dose, another episode of Sunday Morning Dose. And my name is Sean. So today we'll be looking at quite an interesting story in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 4. But because of our time, we'll not be able to read the whole gist in it, but we'll take some of the verses. And I want to encourage you to please do read at your spare time. It's very interesting story of how the city of Jerusalem, the wall of Jerusalem, was being rebuilt. So um, let's look at some of the verses in the book of Nehemiah chapter 4. So the very first verse 1, but it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, and that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. They were being mocked. They had the news that Jerusalem wall was being rebuilt, and the first thing Sanballat will do is to mock them. So in verse 5, do not cover their iniquity. So this is the prayer of the God's people who are trying to rebuild Jerusalem to God. Do not cover their iniquity, and do not let the sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders. In verse 6, so we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had the mind to work. The people were being mocked had the mind to work, so the work won't cease. So the work won't cease. The work continued because the people who wanted to work had the mind to work. They were focused on the work. They were rebuilding. The work won't cease. See what happened. In verse 11, and our adversary said, they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. So it was when the Jews who dwelt near them came that they told us 10 times, from whatever place you turn, they will be upon us. So let me take it a bit backward. Let's read verse 7 so that we understand what happened there. Verse 7, now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, that they became very angry, and all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. Can you imagine? I thought they were being mocked. I thought it was, they felt, oh, this is not a threat to us. I thought Sanballat thought these guys would not be able to rebuild in verse 1. And they were being mocked for that. But the same word, because of the results, has brought envy. And envy has caused them to begin to think of how to attack the city of Jerusalem so that they may cause confusion. Can you imagine? So that was why the leaders in the verse 12, the leaders in Jerusalem in verse 13 made this statement. Therefore, I positioned men behind the lower part of the wall at the openings, and I set the people according to their families with their swords, their spear, and their bows. So they had that these guys are beginning to see them as threat. So what did they do? They positioned men with their swords, their spears, and bows. They were getting ready in case they were being attacked. In verse 20, wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there, and God will fight for us. Verse 21, so we labored in the work, and half of the men are dispersed from daybreak until the stars appeared. Wow. Despite their relationship with God and their prayers, this would not give them enough reason not to labor. They were laboring day and night, laboring to secure their peace, laboring to secure their unity, and laboring to rebuild. They were doing two rigorous tasks at a time. Wow. Wow. So in verse 23, which is the last verse, so neither I, my brethren, my servant, nor the men of the guard who followed me took off our clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. They wouldn't even take off their clothes, except they had to wash. Wow. Wow. You need to read the whole story to get the gist. But let me tell you why they won't take off the cloth here. They won't take off the cloth because their sword is normally tied to their belt, and their belt is part of their garment. So you're getting it now. So that's why they won't take off the cloth, because if they take off the cloth, they will lose their belt, and if they lose their belt, they won't have access again to their swords, their bows and spears. So they needed that because they had that Sambalat are coming to attack. So as you rebuild, there will be enemies that would want you to rebuild. Nigeria needs rebuilding. We need to rebuild Nigeria. But there are enemies who don't want Nigeria to be rebuilt. There are. So what should our response be? What should we do? Get prepared. Get our swords. Yes, before you mistaking me for something else, I'm not asking you to carry a gun. The sword is symbolic in the word of God. So for us to see this, the relationship of the sword in the word of God, let's read Ephesians chapter 6. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 6. So it's not our weapon of warfare is not carnal. So I'm not asking you to pick up a gun or pick up any physical weapon. I'm saying pick up the word of God. So in verse 14, this is what the sword and the belt that they won't take off from the cloth. This is what it symbolized. In verse 14, stand therefore, having guarded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, having guarded your waist with truth. So what is the sword? The truth. The word of God is the sword. So as you rebuild, as we journey in this rebuilding process of a greater nation, you need the word of God. As a lawyer trying to rebuild the judiciary system, you need the word of God. As a carpenter trying to rebuild the beauty system, the interiors, you need the word of God. As an IT person trying to suggest solutions that will help us rebuild this nation, you need the word of God. Because there are people who won't allow, who won't want. There are people like Sambalat who will not just stop at mockery, but will take the mockery to another end, which is to attack. And you need a strong defense. And that defense is your desire for the word of God, is your desire for truth. So you and I need the truth as we rebuild. My encouragement this morning is that you will rebuild, is that we will rebuild the city of our nation to become the best in the world, to become the greatest in the world, that we will take up the responsibility, just like the Jerusalem took up the responsibility to rebuild its wall, that we will take up this responsibility of rebuilding our nation, Nigeria, this morning, and we'll begin to rebuild. And not just that we will rebuild, but we'll do the rigorous tasks that they did also. That with one hand, we will be holding our swords. Yes, we will be holding our swords. And with the other, we will be rebuilding, we will be fixing this nation. And at the end of it all, down the story of this country, our name in the history book will be written as ones who rebuilt the city of Nigeria. So I encourage you, pick up a rebuilding tool and pick up the truth and start rebuilding. Till we see some other time, same station. This is Sunday Morning Dose. Have a great week.